أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. This is study number 19 of the Ramadan Daily Quran Studies for the year 2022, presented by myself, Zahid Aziz, for the Ahmadiyya Anjuman Ishat Islam, Lahore, UK. The topic we'll start with this study is charity. The second great pillar on which the structure of Islam stands, as that structure is explained in the Holy Quran, is charity towards fellow beings. And charity here is meant in its widest sense. And this point is made clear right at the beginning of the Holy Quran in Surah Baqarah, where the main principles of Islam are stated. 3 of them theoretical and 2 practical. And this is in that verse, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. And the 3 theoretical principles are belief in God, as mentioned in this verse, and then in revelation from God and in the hereafter, which is mentioned in the verse after this. But this verse also mentions the 2 practical principles, which are yuqimuna salat, keeping up prayer, and wa mimma razaqnahum yunfiqun, and spending out of what a person has been given. And the verse literally means as follows: those who believe, that is to say Muslims, are those who believe in the unseen, that is to say God, and keep up prayer and spend out of what we, that is to say God, we have given them. Chapter 2, verse 3. And this mimma razaqnahum yunfiqun, spending out of whatever has been given to us, is mentioned after prayer. It stands for charity in a broad sense, for all acts of benevolence and doing good to humanity in general. Because what God has given us is not only the wealth which we possess, but all the other things like our skills, our abilities, our talents, our time, and other resources that we have been gifted with from Almighty Allah. And this verse shows the natural order. Belief in the unseen, yu'minuna bil ghaib, is the starting point of our spiritual progress. And the next step is the seeking of closeness to that unseen through prayer. And that is necessary. It would be no good if you simply believed in God and that was the end of the matter. The next step is seeking of closeness to God through prayer. And again, if it remained at that, it wouldn't be very meaningful unless it leads you, the prayer leads you to perform acts of goodness and benevolence to people. So prayer is the first practical step. And this leads to the second practical step, which is charity. And the Holy Quran constantly teaches that benevolence or the doing of good to others is one of the 2 main pillars of religion and always has been. One has been prayer or submission to God, obedience to God, and the other has been giving in charity. And in one verse, the Holy Quran rejects the claims of Jews and Christians that just by holding certain beliefs, they will go to heaven and they are the only ones who will go to heaven, the only ones who will receive salvation. And rejecting their claim, what Allah says is this: Bala, no, what they are saying is wrong. Bala. Instead of it, Man aslama wajhahu lillahi wa huwa muhsinun falahu ajruhu inda rabbih wa la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun. That indeed, whoever submits himself entirely to Allah and he is the doer of good to others, such is the one who has his reward from his Lord, and there is no fear for such people, nor shall they grieve. And this is how the Holy Quran describes salvation. It is in these terms, that there is no fear for such people, fear of the future, fear of where they're going towards. And they also have nothing to grieve about because they're doing good. So there is nothing that they regret. Now, if you compare the first verse I quoted from Surah Baqarah, which says, keep up prayer and spend out of what we've been given, with this verse, which is the same surah but verse 112, then you see that prayer is referred to here as submission to Allah, and spending out of what we've been given is referred to here as doing of good to others. So here it is man aslama wajhahu lillahi instead of yuqimuna salat. Instead of those who keep up prayer, it is he who submits himself entirely to Allah. And instead of وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ, that they spend out of what they've been given, here it says وَهُوَ مُحْسِنٌ, and such a person is the doer of good to others. And whenever prayer and charity are spoken of together in the Holy Quran, which is very frequent, prayer is always mentioned before charity. And this is because prayer prepares a person for the service of humanity by charitable acts. The words used for charity in the Holy Quran, used most frequently, are the following, and I'll mention 4 of them. One word is infaq, which indeed occurred in the first verse, which I read, yunfekun. Infaq means spending benevolently, spending to do good to others. Another word for doing good is ihsan, which is the doing of good. And that is in the second verse, which I read, وَهُوَ مُحْسِنٌ. Ihsan is a type of charity, is another word for charity. The third one is well known to everyone, zakat. And as a word, it means either growth or purification. And the fourth one I'll mention is also well known to people. It is sadaqah. And sadaqah comes from the root sidq, which means truth. And sadaqah has come to signify from that a charitable deed. So if you look at the words themselves, which are used to denote charitable deeds, they indicate how wide and broad the concept of charity in Islam is. The Holy Quran itself, of course, it lays stress on what we might call the great deeds of charity, the big ones. For example, freeing slaves is mentioned twice, at least, in the Holy Quran. Then there is the feeding of the poor, the taking care of the orphans, and doing good to humanity in general. These are mentioned widely in the Holy Quran, these great deeds of charity. But apart from this, the Holy Quran gives equal value to smaller acts of benevolence that we may do to people around us, such as providing a little help to someone. And because those deeds, the small acts of kindness and charity, the little acts we do every day, it's because they are so important that not to do them, to withhold them, is to go against the spirit of prayer itself. And you will recall the verses I quoted in an earlier study just now about prayer from chapter 107, where Allah condemns those who pray but are unmindful of their prayers. They take no notice of what their prayers should be teaching them, and they do good to be seen. Any good they do, they only do so that people see them doing it. And they refrain from small acts of kindness, the little acts that of goodness that we can do all the time, every day. So the Holy Quran says that they will learn nothing from their prayers, and it condemns them, condemns those people. Similarly, another small act of goodness, which is speaking to people kindly, the use of kind words, that's recommended as a charitable deed in many places in the Holy Quran. And in one place, the speaking of a kind word to parents, in chapter 17, verse 23, the speaking of a kind word to parents is included in doing good to parents. And if we turn to Hadith, then there acts of charity are described more specifically. So a Hadith, a well-known Hadith, tells us that if you remove from the road or the street something lying there which might cause people to be hurt, and you remove it for their benefit, then that is called a sadaqah, or a charitable deed. And according to another hadith, these are the words of the hadith, there is a sadaqah, i.e. that is charity, there is a sadaqah due on every limb of a human body, with every new sun. Every new sun means every day. There is a sadaqah due on every limb of a human being, with every new sun that rises. And to do justice among people is also a charity. So to settle some dispute between people, justly doing justice between them and making sure justice is available to people, it reaches people, is also an act of charity. And this is in Bukhari. And another hadith in Bukhari gives more details. And I'll read it out now in translation. On every limb, there is an act of charity due every day. And that means that every limb of a person must perform some charitable act every day. And then that hadith goes on with examples. A person helps another to mount his animal, to get on it. That is a charity. He helps him to load his animal with the things he wants to put on it. That is also a charity. And of course, we can convert these to our own modern times, where we might not be required to or needed to help someone ride on an animal or to load an animal, but the equivalent with our modern forms of transport, we can convert that easily. So all those are acts of charity. So is a good word, and every step which a person takes in going to prayer is charity. And to show someone the way is also an act of charity. So someone asks you the way to somewhere, and if you have the knowledge, you guide them towards that way, then that is also one of these small acts of charity. And while being a small act, it's it's valued highly by Allah and is a valuable act of charity. And lastly, other acts of charitable deeds mentioned in these, some examples are when you greet people, when you tell people what is right and what is wrong. And in fact, if you stop yourself from harming anyone, even that's regarded as an act of charity, that you attempted to do something which possibly brought you benefit, but it would harm other people, but you then stop doing it, you don't do it, then that is an act of charity by you. That is the end of this study. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. Ameen.